During the height of the Second World War, the difference between a dinner table with a steaming plate of vegetables and a family going to bed hungry often came down to a few square feet of turned soil in a backyard or a vacant city lot. By 1943, nearly 20 million Victory Gardens were producing roughly 40% of all the fresh vegetables consumed in the United States. This wasn't just a morale-boosting hobby. It was a critical pillar of national survival designed to free up agricultural resources for the front lines. Today, we often look back at these gardens through a lens of nostalgia. But for the serious historian and the modern survivalist, the actual techniques used are a masterclass in high-yield, low-resource self-sufficiency. Before we dig into the specific forgotten strategies that allowed ordinary citizens to outproduce commercial farms, make sure to subscribe to Atten Recounts right now so you never miss these deep dives into the practical wisdom of the past. If you want to understand how to turn a small patch of dirt into a literal life support system using the same methods that sustained millions during the world's darkest hours, you are in the right place. The strategic selection of calorie-dense and storage-stable crops was the foundation of the wartime garden. Wartime gardeners did not have the luxury of growing water crops like iceberg lettuce that offered little nutritional value for the heavy labour involved in cultivating them. Instead, the focus was on what the Department of Agriculture defined as health for victory crops. This meant prioritising nutrient-dense leafy greens like kale and Swiss chard, which are incredibly hardy and provide continuous harvests, alongside essential root vegetables like carrots, beets and potatoes. The critical secret to their success was a focus on crops that could be easily stored without relying on electrical refrigeration, which was not universally available. For the modern enthusiast looking to replicate this security, this means shifting your focus away from the fresh salad mindset and toward the pantry mindset. To apply this today, you must prioritize varieties like the Hubbard squash or late-season cabbage. Think of these not just as plants, but as biological batteries that store solar energy in a calorie-dense form that stays edible for 6 months in a simple, cool, dark basement environment. Successive planting and intercropping maximised every square inch of available soil throughout the growing season. One of the most vital logistical secrets of the Victory Garden was the total rejection of wasted space and time. Government pamphlets rigorously taught citizens how to use successive planting, a method ensuring that a hole never remained in the ground once a crop was pulled. As soon as the cool weather spring peas were finished, the vines were tilled immediately back into the soil, and a heat-tolerant crop like bush beans or Swiss chard was planted in that same spot the same day. They also practiced intensive intercropping, which involves planting fast-growing crops in the temporary shadows of slow-growing ones. A prime example used then, which you should use now, is sowing radishes in the exact same row as carrots. Because radishes germinate rapidly and mature in roughly 25 days, they break the soil surface for the slower carrots and are harvested and gone by the time the carrots need that space to expand their roots. You can implement this today by mapping your garden not just by physical dimensions but by a timeline, ensuring no patch of dirt sits idle for more than 24 hours during the growing season. Soil fertility was maintained through intensive localized composting and the use of nitrogen-fixing green manure. Because commercial nitrates and phosphates used in fertilizers were heavily diverted to the front lines for explosives and large-scale grain production, the home gardener had to become a chemist of the backyard to maintain yields. They utilized trench composting, a largely forgotten but highly effective method where daily kitchen scraps were buried directly into the pathways between active garden beds. As the organic matter broke down underground, earthworms would distribute the resulting nutrients directly sideways into the root zones of the adjacent growing plants. Furthermore, they used green manure cover crops by planting clover or vetch in the off-season during autumn. These specific plants pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it into nodules on their roots. When you till these plants back into the earth in the spring, you're essentially injecting free, high-grade fertilizer into your soil. To replicate this, stop throwing away your nitrogen-rich kitchen waste and start burying it exactly where your heavy feeders, like tomatoes and corn, will be planted next season. Community canning centres and the collective preservation of the harvest ensured year-round security beyond the growing season. The Victory Garden movement wasn't just about the agriculture of growing food, it was about the logistics of keeping it viable. In 1943 alone, statistics show that over 4 billion jars of food were processed by home gardeners. This massive undertaking was made possible largely through community canning centres, where the government provided heavy-duty pressure canners that individual families could not afford or obtain due to metal shortages. The technical secret here was the rigorous application of hot-pack pressure canning methods, which allowed for the safe, long-term preservation of low-acid vegetables like green beans, peas and corn without the risk of botulism. For the modern survivalist, the lesson is hard won. A garden without a preservation plan is only half a resource. You must learn the science of the pressure canner, as simple water bath canning is insufficient for the calorie-dense vegetables that actually sustain life through a winter. Pest control relied on manual vigilance and the strategic, functional use of companion planting. Without access to the array of synthetic pesticides available today, wartime gardeners relied on biological warfare and disciplined manual labour to protect their food supply. They used trap crops designed to lure pests away from primary food sources. For example, planting nasturtiums near squash would draw aphids away from the vegetables and onto the sacrificial flowers. They also practiced companion planting in a way that was purely functional rather than aesthetic, such as densely planting onions and garlic among other vegetables to mask the scent of the host plants from searching insects. The most effective tool, however, was the morning patrol. Gardeners were instructed to walk their rows at dawn, hand-picking tomato hornworms or Japanese beetles before the heat of the day made them active. In a modern context, you apply this by diversifying your garden layout and refusing to plant monocultures. Do not plant all your cabbage in one contiguous row, but scatter them throughout the garden to make it statistically harder for pests to locate and decimate your entire crop. The staggering success of the 1940s garden wasn't due to some magical lost agricultural technology. It was the result of a disciplined application of proven principles under extreme pressure. These gardens disappeared quickly when the war ended because the return of the industrial food complex made them seem labour-intensive and unnecessary. However, the knowledge of how to sustain yourself from a small plot of land remains the ultimate insurance policy against an uncertain future. By focusing on calorie density, maximizing space through succession planting, and mastering the thermodynamics of the pressure canner, you are not just gardening, you are reclaiming a lost form of essential sovereignty. If you found this deep dive into the practical history of survival valuable, please share this video with someone who values self-reliance, and do not forget to subscribe to Atten Recounts for more insights into the strategies that kept our ancestors alive.